unbelievable. Hello guys, and welcome back to this new video. Today we are going to discuss with you 10 inventions, 10 ancient Egyptian inventions that have survived to this day. So let's start immediately. Okay, point number one, invention number one, makeup. I know I could have chosen something else like the wheel or whatever, but I didn't. So first, makeup. Now, makeup is very interesting. Makeup was, technically speaking, born and blossomed within that society. Makeup was used by women, but also by men. And for the eyes, what was used was soot plus a mineral that is called galena. And basically you would have what is called coal that was applied like we do apply the eyeliner on top of the eye, literally, right? And then they would shape it in the eye in a elongated manner, so you would have the look of a cat eye. Literally, that's how we call it nowadays, I think at least. And that was the typical makeup for eyes. And then for the face was used a powder, a whitening powder. Now, that was the makeup usually applied to the face and the eyes, considered to have therapeutic effects. So we're talking about protecting the skin from the sun and protecting the eyes from infections. But we're also talking about magical sort of protection, because this shape that you would give to the eye in ancient Egypt was kind of like resembling and purposely reminding ancient Egyptians of the eye of Horus. And that was important because it would have this sort of like good luck protection sort of influence on you, on your life. Now, we said that makeup was for women and for men, and that is mostly because it would indicate the belonging of that person to a social class, and naturally there was a high class within that society. So it was a symbol, a sign to distinguish themselves, and this is not at all untypical or uncommon. If we go back to primitive tribes in Amazonia, and if we go back to what Levi-Strauss has written, there are entire societies, communities, and tribes that would paint themselves, their entire body, and that is to discern themselves and their being human from nature. So it's usually a very typical trait, if you like, also of primitive tribes and societies. And by that, I'm not saying necessarily that, I'm not saying at all that Egyptians were primitive. If we look at the culture in its complexity, they were very forward thinking, and they were very advanced as a society under many regards. Let's move on. Let's go to point number two. Point number two, and one of the greatest inventions that Egyptians have left us, is the papyrus. That happened before the invention in China of paper, and whilst in Babylonia they were using clay tablets to write, and the papyrus was this plant that they would treat, of course. They would cut it, press it, and dry it out, and then they would put like several pieces of papyrus, one next to the other, glue them together through a mixture of water and flour, and that's how we get the papyrus. Speaking of which, third invention is that of ink. Now, mostly black ink, but also there were colored pigments that they were using to actually write on the papyrus. So that was such an invention, such a remarkable invention for all its implications. We have used ink, or we still do, actually, yeah, we still do. And we have used ink since then. And by the way, the oldest papyrus, which we have lost because we don't have it unfortunately, goes back to the 2nd millennia before Christ. So let's think how old that is. I mean, impressive. Invention number 4. Invention number 4 is that of a plow. So plows were dramatically important. You know, if you wanted to harvest the soil, then you need to plow. Now, initially we know that the form of plowing was that of using other men to do the job. We can easily understand that that was highly ineffective as a method. And so since 2000 before Christ, what happened was that animals, domesticated, tamed animals, were deployed to do that. And initially Egyptians thought of connecting the plow directly to the horns of the animals, like ox and horses and cows, and then they switched it up and they connected to the latch to the body of the animal, and that was or became to be effective. Now, it is also true that because of that, due to the presence of lime, the soil was pretty muddy. So we get to have a more serious form of plow with the heavyweight iron plow only much later, because we're talking about France and we're talking about 1000 before Christ, so a bit later. But the invention of plow can be traced back and can be ascribed to the culture of the ancient Egyptians. Another invention concerns their oral hygiene. Well, yes. Alright, so the problems in terms of cavities and the problems with the enamel of their teeth were pretty common. And also, one very common disease, if you want to call it like that, or issue that ancient Egyptians had was that of bad breath. So how did they cure it? These people were genius, I swear to you. Alright, so they invented basically what is a prototype, what is the ancestor of our mints. You know, we use chewing gums or we use mints when our breath is not the best. And so did they. Specifically, they created these gum balls made of myrrh, cinnamon, frankincense to chew just to correct bad breath. But the problems with teeth were not just limited to bad breath. So invention point number 6 are the inventions of toothbrush and toothpaste. How? So toothbrush was very simple. You just had like one little minute stick, jagged ends, so you could kind of clean. Toothpaste, much more interesting, because we do have 2 recipes of toothpaste. So one was very abrasive, made with ashes, pumice powder, eggshell, and also powder extracted from ox hooves. I don't know what that is, and honestly, I don't even want to know. The second one that we have preserved in a papyrus that traces back to the 4th century was made of salt, mint, peppercorns shredded, and dried iris flowers. That must have been much nicer, and probably a good prototype for our modern toothpaste. So invention number 7, bowling. Yes, researchers, specifically Italian researchers from Pisa, have discovered this kind of like slate floor with grooves, 4-meter long. Now, apparently, the way ancient Egyptians would play was to position themselves at the beginning and end of the track, and then you were supposed to hit the skittles positioned at the center of the track. So we just changed, because nowadays we place them at the bottom, but at the end of the track. But that was exactly the same game. Invention number 8, locks. Specifically, around 4000 before Christ, you had these locks that were exactly functioning with the same mechanism they function nowadays. The only problem with those locks was the size, the dimensions, because we are talking about 60 centimeters, so like a meter of a key to enter the door. So unmanageable for our modern practices, but in standards, but pretty good. Invention point number 9. Okay, this is probably my favorite because I discovered so many things in just in regard to this particular invention. I was like shocked. Okay, so first point, something I already knew, probably somewhere else also in another video, but what I discovered is that it was common practice for ancient Egyptians to shave themselves. Mostly shave themselves completely. This is something I knew. They would shave literally everything. Head hair included. Now, they would do that possibly because of the torrid climate, understandable. Also, having beard was not allowed. But if you do look at the statues, and this is the part that I didn't know, if you do look at the statues, what you see is actually some beard there. And this is the most interesting fact here. Beard was only allowed if you were mourning, because it was a sign of you neglecting yourself. And this is another good point. Ancient Egyptians, narcissistic people. I mean, I don't mean to say really that's a stretch, you understand that. But the point is, they were taking so much care of their own body. They would shave, always be presentable according to the standards of the time, which paradoxically very close to our standards. And the other thing was that pharaohs, for instance, would have a fake beard. This is another interesting point. Fake beard made of wool taken from sheep. Which makes you think, like, what? Right? But that's what they were doing, right? They were taking this wool, treat it, make it square, excessively long, and that's how you get to the pharaoh's beard. I mean, I didn't know. I thought it was unbelievable. In all of this, of course, the invention is that of a professional figure of barbers, and of course blades that were suited for the job. The most refined ones were in copper. Okay. Invention number 10, the last, unfortunately, the last one is that of assembly lines. They had a pretty systematic division of labor, and specifically they were particularly famous for chariots. Now, chariots were not their own invention, meaning chariots were already known in another society that was that of Ixos, but chariots were extremely perfected in the society of the ancient Egyptians. And chariots were using mostly for the pharaoh to be able to hunt. Whereas other more poor, low-income families not having that type of social standing would use carts but dragged by oxen and donkeys. Life sometimes can be miserable. And of course nowadays we don't use chariots, but their assembly line and their way of working was hugely inspirational to Henry Ford and Taylor in the mass production. I would extend this from cars to mass production in general, because assembly lines are so much used nowadays in the making of whatever product you can think of. But with that being said, guys, that is it. We're done for the day. So let me know what you think. Let me know what impressed you the most. And that is it, I guess, okay? So if you have enjoyed the video, don't forget to comment below. I would really love to understand your thoughts on this. And don't forget to like the video if you have enjoyed this video, to subscribe to the channel, and to hit the notification bell if you do want to receive our updates. Now, we'll talk next time with a new video. Bye!